Hi everyone, I'm Amanda and today I'm going to show you how to make a baby hat. So what you'll need are circular needles, double pointed needles, 5 of them. These are US size 7 and so are these, and some yarn. To start off, the first thing we have to do is cast on. But to cast on, we need our very first stitch, and that stitch is called the slip stitch. So you need a fair amount of yarn because we're going to be casting on 64 stitches. I'd say however much this is looks like enough. How to make a slip knot is you put your 2 fingers together, wrap the yarn around twice, and then pull it through as a loop, and then pull it tight. The cast on method I'll be showing you today is called the long tail cast on. So you want your tail end that ends sooner on the left side, and this side should be attached to the rest of your ball. So you're going to pinch your 2 fingers together, place them between the strands, open them, grab the strands underneath your index and your thumb, and insert the needle in that little hole there. Hook that piece of yarn, bring the needle back through, pull to tighten, and just repeat this. Now that I've cast on all 64 stitches in something that had a little more yarn this time, so I didn't run out, I'm going to start knitting in the round. So how you're going to do this is you're going to take it as if you just finished casting on, because you probably did. Just start knitting the normal way, but this is your other needle and it just happens to be connected. However, before you start, you have to make sure that there are no twists. See, I have a twist here where the stitches go all the way around and back, and we don't want a twist because that can mess up the knitting later on. So make sure to untwist that before you start, because once you do start, it will be too late. So untwist it, fix the little pieces of yarn, make sure you knit with the piece of yarn that's coming from the ball, not the tail, and start knitting. So use that nursery rhyme that I mentioned in my previous video, where you go in through the front door, dance around the back, out through the window, and off jumps Jack. And remember to make this first stitch especially tight, because it's going to be loose later on, but you'll have less problems if you try and make it as tight as possible now. You can make it tight by pulling on this piece of yarn here right after you knit it. You won't have to do anything when you get to the next round. You can just keep on knitting until you get 5 solid inches of knitting done. Okay, so now that we've knit our 5 inches, it should look like this, but not necessarily this color. You're going to take your 5 double pointed needles and start transferring your stitches onto them. And how you do that is you could slip them, but I find it easier to knit them on. So instead of taking this needle that's part of your circular needles, you're going to take one of your double pointed needles and knit as you normally would. When you're doing this, after you put the first 8 stitches on, you're going to place a marker, which can be a little silver ring or something similar to that. And then you knit 8 more stitches and then you switch to the next needle. Okay, so now that we've knit 8 stitches onto our first double pointed needle, take your little marker, place it on the needle, and knit 8 more stitches. Okay, you should have 16 stitches on this first needle. I use these little stopper things to make sure that the stitches don't fall off the needle, but these aren't entirely necessary. You've got quite a bit of space. It's just because I'm a loose knitter and the stitches are slippery. So now you can take your next needle, knit 8 more, and continue doing the same thing until you run out of stitches. Okay, so I've transferred all of my stitches onto the double pointed needles, and now I'm just going to start knitting again, just like I was on the circular needles here, but they're different. There's more of them. And also, we're going to start decreasing now, so it will get smaller at the top and make the shape of a hat rather than just a tube. So, we will knit the first 6 stitches. And I recommend making this very first stitch on the needle particularly tight so that it's not going to make a weird ladder pattern later on. So we've got 2 stitches left before the marker, and we're going to knit them together. And this is a type of decrease. So how you do it is just as if you're knitting a regular stitch, but instead of just one, you're knitting 2 stitches. So you put the needle in the second stitch and bring it through both of them, wrap the yarn around, hook it back through, and take them off. This is quite an easy decrease, and it's one of my favorites, and it's called a knit 2 together because you're knitting 2 stitches together. Now you're going to knit 6 regular stitches again until there's 2 more stitches left on the needle, and you're going to knit them together again as well. And that's your first double pointed needle in the round. Now we're going to move on to the next needle. This is your new free one, and you just do the exact same thing. In the next round, you'll do the same thing, except instead of knitting 6 before you decrease, you'll knit 5. So every time you decrease, it will be the last 2 stitches before the marker or the last 2 stitches on the end of the needle. And that means you don't actually have to count that much if you're just paying attention to how many stitches you have left. Okay, so I've gotten down to 3 stitches per section, and I'm just going to keep going where I knit 1 stitch now, knit 2 together. Slip the marker, 1 stitch, knit 2 together, next needle. And then when you get to the next round, you're going to have to take the markers off. So I've already started this round, but we're down to 2 stitches per section. You just knit those together without doing any regular knit stitches. And then you take the marker off, and then you knit the other 2 stitches together. And then you do the next needle. This is the last one because I did the first 2 needles off camera. So you should be having, by the end of this round, 2 stitches per needle. This is the part where I stray a bit from what the pattern says. So I came up with a little trick that makes it easier for me, and it will probably make it easier for you. So you knit the 2 stitches on the first needle again, like so, together, and then you take off this needle, and rather than using this needle and knitting the 2 stitches together on the next one and having 1 stitch per needle, I find that this is dangerous in the sense that it's very easy to lose stitches this way. So I just start putting them all on the same needle because you'll have to do this eventually anyways. And now you should have 4 stitches all on 1 needle. And the hat is almost done. We just have 1 more part left, and that part is called the I-cord. So rather than normal knitting, where you would start from this side and knit, you slide it over, which is why you need double pointed needles for this part. And I know the yarn is on the left side, but it's supposed to be, and you're going to knit as usual. Knit the 4 stitches the normal way, and then slide it over again. And what this is going to do is make what's called an I-cord. I'll do 1 more row of the I-cord. And then, instead of casting off like I taught you in the last video, sometimes we can finish things in a different way. Instead, we cut off the yarn around this length, which is, I'd say, 3/4 of a foot, and we fish it through the stitches. So you need a darning needle for this. Okay, I've threaded my darning needle, and now I'm going to fish it through the stitches. So you want to pull it down with your other hand and make sure it goes through all of them, because if it doesn't, then you'll lose the stitches and your hat will start to unravel, which you do not want, because that's hard to save. Then you pull it, and then this part can also be tricky. You want to fish it down through the I cord. So just keep pushing it down and then grab it from the inside. And you're going to pull to make it tight. So these stitches up here are now safe and you didn't even have to cast off. And now you're going to do something called weaving in the ends. So there isn't really a specific method that you have to follow to weave in the ends. You just want to make sure that it's not visible from the other side, and that's about it. You just push your needle through some of the stitches and follow the shape of your knitting. And then you keep going until you either run out of yarn or until you've done probably around 15 stitches, and then you can cut it off and then you're done. And you might want to weave in your other end as well, which is this one. But once you've done that, your baby hat is done. I like to tie this little I cord at the top, makes it look cute, and that's your baby hat.